Morant with a running start. Elevate! Dunks! Oh my goodness! Tie game in overtime. Gasol will turn. His heat is gone! Memphis on top. 7-10 remaining. Conley now with three. Count it! A 15-point lead for Memphis. And Blake Griffin gets into it on the floor with Randolph. Hard to tell if there are any punches being thrown under there, but Griffin took acceptance. Adams going long. Morant! Oh, he hit it! John Morant, insanity!
You gotta be kidding me.
Welcome to Grits and Grinds, a Memphis Grizzlies podcast. Grizzlies lose by a million edition. My name is Keith Parrish. The Grizzlies were not up to the task of facing the New York Knicks at Madison Square Garden. And to talk about the game, I'm joined by Chris Herrington of the Daily Memphian. Chris, how about them Grizzlies?
Grizzlies, Keith. You're always going to have, it was the worst game of the season. I think we can all agree on that. You're always going to have your worst game of the season. There's always something's going to be your worst game of the season. And on the road against a good team, it's sort of where it would normally be. But I think that was more troubling than it could have otherwise been, just because there's been doubts of creeping up around the team about how good they are when they play the good teams, right?
Yeah.
And you're on the 6-game winning streak, but like three of those wins are against bad teams. The other 3 are against sort of like play-in level teams.
Yeah.
And then you go to New York and you get absolutely smacked around from beginning to end. So it was a disconcerting night, I would say.
Are we? I hadn't thought of it as the worst loss of the season. I
think it has to be. I didn't go through the game log, but I think
the Thunder game for me was humiliating in a sense that like we are not this team. Like we're not close to this team. This team can't, like we can't do it. Like, I don't know. That one, I'm now looking at the score. It was 130 to 106. The Grizzlies shot 38% on that one. Something horrible. Yeah, 14 for 50. I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The Thunder, Knicks losses. And then you have the unexpected, the early season. Hey, we lost to the Nets twice. I guess it doesn't matter. But yeah, fair enough.
In retrospect, you go back and look, and the Nets team then was not the Nets team now. Like you were expecting the tanking Nets, and
yeah,
unfortunately, the Grizzlies got the Nets twice before they were the tanking Nets.
It doesn't really matter. We can call it the worst game of this season. The Grizzlies allowed 100. The actual specifics of the numbers also doesn't really matter, but I like numbers. 143 points allowed. That's only 2 off the most points they've ever allowed in a game. The Grizzlies were the best statistically third quarter team in the NBA coming into this game and got trucked in the third quarter. So yes, Chris, it was a very upsetting, disappointing performance. I wanted to hear what Taylor Jenkins thought of it, but the post-game press conference was like 60 seconds long. I assume there's no media there.
Yeah, I don't think either Drew or DeMichael Cole were out there for that.
Yeah. So what are the biggest issues for you in losing this one game? And it's just one game. And I made the joke a couple places. It's probably hard going from a week where you play the Hornets, Jazz, and Pelicans at home to playing a good team that actually competes. But what are your thoughts on why this happened?
I think a lot of people wonder broadly about the Grizzlies, and I'm one of them, about regular season basketball versus postseason basketball. And when you get a game like this on the road against a good team that's going to slow it down, although I don't know, I haven't looked at the pace number of that game. There were so many turnovers and leakouts, maybe not as much. But stylistically, the Knicks play, it was a stylistic contrast. They play slower, heavier minutes for the starters. They play playoff basketball all season, right? Yeah. And the Grizzlies play regular season basketball all season. And I think we all think that there will be a shift in the playoffs in terms of, a little bit in terms of style and in terms of rotation for the Grizzlies, but they're not there yet, and the Knicks are always there. So to me, it felt like a playoff game and a playoff team and a preseason team playing a regular season game. It's sort of what it felt like. I think that there are a few different reasons why to have that concern about the potential gap between the Grizzlies and regular season and playoffs. One, and I saw Tom Haberstroh did something about this. I took notes about this a month ago, but I had to set it aside, so I'll write about it at some point later in the season. They start 2 rookies, and that just doesn't happen for teams that advance to the playoffs don't start 2 rookies, and most of the time don't start 1 rookie. Like, it's pretty rare. If you go back over the last 10 years, there's not a lot of examples of rookies starting on teams that advance to the playoffs. Like it's pretty rare. So there's that aspect to it. There's the question of just sort of toughness and the quality of the middle of the roster. I think the Grizzlies have 3 all-star level players, and they are, by some measures, you could say they're the deepest team in the league because all the guys can play. Like they're 11 through 15, I think, is among the best in the league. That doesn't matter in playoff basketball. And so the quality of the 4, 5, 6 is important and very questionable for the Grizzlies. And then there's this question of style of play, and it's really hard to pick apart because, I don't know, I think today they're like 5th offense and 7th defense. The defense has been slipping a lot lately, but, on the season, like the outcomes are there. But I wonder about some of the style of play stuff. I've been agnostic about this all season. I think some of the styles, not just the pace, but the style shift has sort of led to some of the turnovers, and the turnovers were the biggest problem in that game last night. I don't think, and this is anecdotal because I haven't gone through and tried to call it. It'd be a big project, but this concept of like we play deep and we play fast and that wears teams down. I don't think there's any real evidence that actually happens, and even less so against the good teams. On the season, the Grizzlies have a positive point differential net rating in every quarter except for the fourth quarter, which they lose. And so that is not a sign of like you're wearing teams down, So I think there are a lot of issues in there, and I think that Knicks game sort of under highlights a lot.
Yeah, anecdotally, I think you'd point to the Grizzlies' really good record on the second night of back-to-backs. I can't remember what it is. Maybe they've lost once or they haven't lost. I can't remember.
No back-to-backs in the playoffs, by the way.
Exactly. Also, the Grizzlies have no fourth quarter. They've only come back from a fourth quarter deficit twice this season, and it's both times it's been the Timberwolves, which just that team loves losing fourth quarter leads against the Grizzlies. So like if the Grizzlies were in fact wearing their opponent down, you think maybe when you're trailing after 3 quarters you would come back and win sometimes, but it hasn't happened.
It's something that sounds good, and I've heard in post-game, pre-game press conferences that question get asked because it sounds right. Like, Taylor, do you think your style and your pace is wearing the teams down? And the answer is always like, well, we hope so, or whatever. But like, there's no evidence that happens that I can see.
So the turnovers, 26 turnovers for the Grizzlies, which is a staggering number. Also, like I was rewatching bits of this earlier this morning. It was a competitive game through the first half, through the first 5 minutes of the third quarter.
It was an 8-point game at half. They make the switch to Brandon Clark, which I think seemed like the right switch to make.
Yep.
And it just didn't happen.
Well, they still kept hitting 3-pointers in the third quarter, and I think it was like 9 points, like 5 minutes in the third quarter. But 26 turnovers. By the way, I looked this up. This is just the 82nd time in NBA history a team has given up 140 or more points and also turned the ball over 25 or more times. Surprisingly, 7 teams have won while doing that, but it wasn't the Grizzlies. Like that's an insane number of turnovers. The thing that seemed to match up with previous losses, I'm thinking of a Rockets game where the Grizzlies had a ton of turnovers. It felt like the same thing where you're spreading the offense out. You're not getting assists. I'm going to talk about the assists in a second, but you have very low team assist totals. And when you get those one-on-one opportunities that the new offense is supposed to create, there are help defenders reaching in, swiping at the ball and getting the ball constantly. Right. And I don't know if it's like the 5% difference between Mikal Bridges on defense versus, it might be a bigger percentage than like your random Charlotte Hornet or something. Just like the teams that are slightly better, all of a sudden those Desmond Bane one-on-one moves, those Santi Aldama trying to dribble past this guy in space, they're like Karl Anthony Towns is swiping down and getting the ball or disrupting the player enough where then they get stuck, they throw the ball out of bounds or they miss a shot.
I mean, you're talking about one team that has Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby on it, another team that has Dylan Brooks and Amin Thompson on it.
Yeah,
and this level of defender, right? I wrote a little bit about the turnover stuff a few weeks ago, sort of the turnover and pace stuff, and it's sort of hard to pick apart. And not just pace, but turnover and system stuff. And I think there are like different genres of turnovers. And I do think there are some that seem to be a byproduct of the offensive system and maybe the lack of comfort still to this point in the offensive system. Some of that is, the strip turnovers rise because there's more drive, right?
Mm-hmm.
To your point. But some of the bad pass turnovers come from like you're trying to like drive and then kick or dump, and you're trying to, get into their principles or their movement patterns or all this kind of stuff. And like, you're not that much more familiar with it than the other team is maybe at some point, and like you're trying to force passes that aren't there. You also we've seen a lot of turnovers, not as much last night, but we've seen a lot of turnovers this season of just miscommunication. Yeah. Like your basic pass from the top of the key where you think a guy's going one way and he's really going the other. And like that stuff is somewhat understandable when you're installing like new stuff, but like we're more than halfway through the season at this point. And I really thought, and I do think, I didn't see it as much last night, but in some games recently, I've seen them start the game with multiple high pick and roll with Zach Edey to start the game. I don't have the numbers to prove that has become, they've been doing that more, but I think they've been doing that more. I thought they would push even further, because when you go back to training camp, Taylor Jenkins talked about, we're focusing on, installing our 3Ps or whatever, but then we're going to work in, more pick and roll sets and more other kinds of stuff. I think they need to do that. I would like to see more variety in the offense by the time you get to the playoffs. And I wonder about, I don't know if you want to get into this, but like a lot of people wonder about the Ja Morant piece of that too.
Yeah, we got to get to Ja in a second. Yeah, so I just thought of this while you were talking. Maybe some of those turnovers that we saw of the team throwing the ball out of bounds because the guy wasn't where maybe Desmond Bane thought he was going to be. Maybe it's because they're varying from their new offense. They're actually trying to run more traditional stuff, and they got caught in between where it's like, I messed this up. No, it's funny. Actually, I said on my show after the Hornets win that I was like, I haven't tracked this, but it felt like we ran way more pick and rolls than normal. Adam, the Grizzlies film guy, was actually like, no, I tracked it. We ran way fewer in that Hornets game. And then I was like, well, how many times did the Hornets actually set their defense? And he's like, oh, I don't have that number. They didn't, okay. They didn't actually set their defense. I can't remember what else I was thinking. Oh no, the correlation between assists and made threes and the opponent. So sometimes, I love spouting off these stats. Like the Grizzlies are 2-9 when they make 10 or fewer 3-pointers. And they're not predictive, necessarily useful. It's just like saying that's a thing that happened. And it seems obvious. Of course, you miss all your 3-pointers, you're going to lose. And then we see the turnover correlation. Like I talked about Ja Morant. Ja Morant had 2 assists and 4 turnovers against the Knicks. Right now in losses, Ja's averaging 5 assists per game and 5.5 turnovers per game. But my big concern, and I do think there's some truth in this statistic, is looking at the low turnover games. Keep missing that. The low assist games for the Grizzlies and opponents. So the Grizzlies right now have had 25 or fewer. It's just a nice round number. They've had 25 or fewer assists 11 times. But here are the opponents that it's happened against. The Knicks last night, the Rockets 3 times, the Celtics, the Nuggets, the Lakers, Warriors, Mavericks, and Nuggets. For me, all of those are good teams. And it's like, all right, so in 11 times we've played a good opponent, we actually don't get these 30 assist games, these 35 assist games. We're down at 25 assists or lower, and we have a bad record. So that stat feels like there's some correlation to the actual opponent and the result.
Well, the Grizzlies want to play fast, and not just like in terms of fast break, just in terms of like, and to me, that's another component of the turnovers too. I've seen some of those of Desmond Bane where he's just he's so in a hurry to be in a hurry that you forget about the ball, right? And I think that is because there's been drilled into them to move fast at all times, and so they want to play super fast. It's a truism that games slow down in the playoffs, but it's a truism because it's true, and games also slow down as you go deeper into games. If you look at pace numbers across quarters, like it slows down in the fourth quarter. And the Grizzlies, if they're going to be a serious playoff team, need to be able to play in a game that's not to that style, because it's probably not going to be to that style in the playoffs. And that gets into the offensive system. That gets into the questions of the youth of the team. That gets into questions of like the physicality and toughness of the team. It sort of ties into all that.
So Ja Morant had a tough game. Ja Morant, like I said, 2 assists, 4 turnovers, only had 10 points. He got visibly frustrated after every miss. And I did go back and I rewatched all of his shot attempts, and I think he has a legit gripe on a few of them. It legitimately is kind of awkward that he had 0 free throw attempts in that basketball game. The most obvious foul, I think, was in the third quarter. He hits a driving layup on Josh Hart, absolutely gets hit in the head, and there's no call. And this is after 8 previous field goal attempts where he felt like he was fouled. I don't think I would say 2 of them were clear fouls of the previous 8. The rest were like, yeah, personally, I like those were not foul calls because give the defense a chance, you know?
No, I agree in a general sense, but when you're John Morant in in the NBA game, and you're John Morant, that means you attack the paint a lot, and B, you're one of the biggest stars in the game. You expect to get most of the real foul calls and get a few that aren't, you know?
That's a good point. Yeah.
The way it's supposed to go. Now, that game, it really looked like that game. He came out from the very beginning focused on trying to score himself in the paint, right?
Yeah.
Attack and score in a way that hasn't always been the norm this season. He really seemed like he was focused on attacking and scoring. And then when it wasn't happening, he wasn't getting the calls. I agree. You could see the frustration. It's not, and that game wasn't a one-off in terms of the frustration. That's been a thing all season with him and the officiating. And you wonder whether those two things sort of feed off of each other a little bit. His expressed frustration to the officials, does that make them less likely to give him whistles? Does his own frustration build? Does that impact his play? A lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was notable. I felt like the first play of the game, he misses a left-handed layup where he normally makes. And I need more camera angles to see if Karl Anthony Towns actually dislodges him. From the TV camera, it doesn't look like a foul. It just looks like, all right, Ja blew that layup. But then there were some others where he bumped into his defender. He didn't get the call. And then you had on the other end, Jalen Brunson did get bumped and they gave him the call. I actually was surprised, again, rewatching the game in the third quarter. I was surprised Taylor Jenkins didn't do one of his like storm onto the court things just to draw maybe more attention to it. Cause again, it was still like a 10-point game midway through the third, but regardless, Ja finishes with 10 points in this big game, does not get to the line, gets very frustrated. He had maybe a slightly underwhelming game on Saturday. I think also we can maybe hope that he's still feeling the effects of the illness that kept him out on Friday night. So he hasn't had a great game since missing that game on Friday night. Do you think it's some of that, or do you think it's the bigger issue of just sometimes Ja Morant is not always the Ja Morant we're hoping for?
Well, I think it could be a little of all these things that sort of feed in. I wonder about, he has had, and at this point I've lost track. It's like 8, 9 separate absences this season. It's not one big injury, right?
Yeah.
And it's all like this last one was illness, but the rest of them are like, or various small injury things. And you wonder about the accumulation of just stuff over the course of the season with him a little bit. There's that aspect to it. He tends, and I don't think this is like, I don't think I'm breaking news here, but like when you're like in the locker room after every game and you're, around the team, in terms of like the 3 stars on the team, Josh is the moodiest guy, right?
Yeah.
He's the guy he's the guy who's least predictable in terms of what his mood is going to be. I think he tends to be a pretty emotional guy. He tends to be a pretty moody guy. I think things tend to get to him and stay with him longer than other guys. And so that's always a factor to me in trying to think about like what kind of game is John Morant having. It's like, well, how's he feeling? I mean, I think that's more part of it with him to me than it is with Desmond Bane or Jared Jackson. That's for sure.
Yeah. So Ja hasn't been totally, I don't know, maybe up to his standard of excellence in a lot of the big games. Also, I think when we look at this game, it's, for me, part of it was like, yeah, all right, Desmond Bane turned the ball over a lot. Yeah, Jaylen Wells isn't making his shots. But part of it was just like, if Ja Morant is not going to have it and he's going to be that prominently involved in your team, that might be a hurdle you cannot overcome in a game against a quality opponent.
I mean, to me, part of it, we're doing a lot of on the game last night, obviously, because we're talking the next morning. To me, what that game really does is put a really hard spotlight on the next game. At Houston. Because you can always find excuses for individual games, right? And who knows? Maybe they went out the night before and the New York nightlife got to them, or like whatever. Or maybe I think I saw you post something on social media about like, you play like the Hornets and the Jazz or whatever. You're not really prepared for the hard switch to a real team, right? That kind of thing. No excuse is going to be there for you on Thursday, right?
Yep.
You're at home. You're going to have 2 days rest. You have just got your butts kicked by the Knicks. You're playing this team that is winning these close, tight games against good opponents, that has beaten you 3 times, 2 of them very close games in the end. It's national TV, a lot of focus. Like, single games aren't a referendum, but that game is going to have a lot of spotlight on it, and not for fans, for everyone else, but for the team itself. I think it's really going to be a little bit of a test of what they're about.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that Amen Thompson is turning into Scottie Pippen Sr. as we speak. Also, Chris, Dylan Brooks made 10 3-pointers. Would you care to comment?
That is one of those nights type situation. What Amen Thompson is doing is not a one of those nights type situation. That's just becoming every night.
Amen whipped the Cavs a couple days ago, and then he whipped the Celtics last night.
Dylan, get it out of the system now, I guess, would be my thing. Like, have that night in Boston, don't have it in Memphis. Sure.
I legit was talking to people last night, and I'm like, I cannot believe I watched Ja Morant post a -41 plus minus. Meanwhile, on the other channel, Dylan Brooks had made 9 3-pointers before I switched it over. I can't believe I missed that entertainment.
There was stuff going around yesterday about like the Grizzlies starting lineup has the best net ratings. It's blah, blah, blah.
They still do, Chris.
Even after last night?
Yeah.
I guess starting Brandon Clark in the second half sort of helped. You sort of broke that lineup up.
They still have, according to Cleaning the Glass, they're plus 38.7 points per 100 possessions. That's been 248 possessions. Yeah. That's your normal starting lineup. I was surprised when the game started. Not surprised. I was interested when the game started to see if they would stick with Zach Edey, because it seemed like an obvious spot to maybe do Brandon Clark, but then second half they did switch it. And
we've been down this road before in playoff basketball against a team that was playing Karl-Anthony Towns at center, surrounded by perimeter-oriented players, and the Grizzlies starting a paint-bound center in Steven Adams. We saw what happened, right? The plug got pulled, and Brandon Clark became the guy. And lo and behold, it happened again last night, at least halfway through. So,
yeah, you mentioned this upcoming Rockets game. Of course, it's huge, but also 2 days of rest. Here's a very weird stat, and then we'll take a break. This season, Chris, on 2 or more days rest, Jaylen Wells is shooting 53% on 3-pointers. That is 53. That's 53 of his attempts. On 1 or fewer days rest, he's only shooting 35% on threes. Is that anything?
It might be something. Like, you don't play back-to-backs in college basketball, right? You don't play the same kind of game frequency or the same length of season. And so as a rookie adjusting to an NBA schedule, I think that could be something.
Okay, well, let's take a break, and then I want to talk about the lineup. I want to talk about the upcoming trade deadline and a few other observations. All right, Chris, before I go, were there any positives or the things you liked about this game from the Knicks? Because I had a couple that actually delighted me, but I want to know if you saw anything that was positive.
I mean, the spread it out offense that's supposed to generate a lot of movement and passing and assists and sometimes bogs down into just guys going one-on-one. Jared Jackson is still awesome at going one-on-one.
So good.
So there's that. Like, Jared, and I was one of the biggest Jared boosters. I said back at the time he was my favorite player in that draft. I didn't have him ranked 1. I had him ranked 3rd, but I said he was my favorite player in the draft.
Yeah.
I never in a million years thought he was going to become the, like, everybody get out of the way, Jared's getting buckets all night guy. And even in the context of that mess, he was still a guy who went out and get buckets. I thought Brandon Clark was good. I thought Santi Aldama, coming back from the absence and had some funky games lately, I thought was pretty good. Certainly before the game got out of hand, Brandon Clark and Santi Aldama were really helping them keep them in the game in the first half. I think that's all I got.
Okay.
Am I missing something good that happened other than
No, I know it's very subjective. Mine is no. You make a good point that Jaren was still great. Jaren had 21 points, made 8 out of 14 field goal attempts, including making 3 3-pointers. I think notable for us grits and grinds listeners, the audience, as we track the guys who played. I thought it was interesting how the first 10 guys, the 5 guys off the bench, did not include Scottie Pippen Jr. because Santi Aldama and Jake LaRavia were available. Those guys seemed a bigger priority. That kind of leads into what I liked the most. I liked the big lineups. I liked the fact that they played Gigi Jackson at the 2. That's what I'm talking about. And then they played Aldama at the 3 with those guys with Jaren and Brandon. Okay. I like a supersized lineup.
You like it? Okay. I think it's notable. I forgot about this. It's a good point. I even posted about it on whatever platform last night.
Yep.
They run out. Was it third quarter? Was it second quarter? They run out at one point. Luke Kennard. I'm going to call Santi the 2 in this lineup. Luke Kennard, Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson, and who were the bigs?
In the first quarter they did it. They did it with Jaren and Brandon. Okay, they also did one. Let me check this out. They also did one with Santi. All right, keep going. Sorry, I'll look it up.
I think later in the game I was not paying exclusive attention. So anyway, it was Luke Kennard, Santi Aldama, Gigi Jackson, Brandon Clark, Jaren Jackson, right?
Yeah,
that's right. Two Jacksons. I don't know if that's good. I think it's notable. Yeah. But I also think it's a little bit troubling in that, yes, the regular season, but it's the middle of the season on the road against a good team, and you're still in the game, and you're just throwing out lineups that have never played with each other.
Yeah.
And that don't really make sense from a basketball perspective. Like Luke Kennard, who, they've been playing him as more of a combo recently, and I think with success, and I wrote about that this week. But has mostly been more of a spot-up shooter kind of guy, and now he's literally the only guard on the floor on the road against the Knicks when you're still in the game. I don't know if that was a good thing.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was notable. We should look at the specific turnovers maybe for that lineup. But I've been liking the idea of the non-point guard stuff, and maybe I'm just re-emphasizing my previously held beliefs in the offseason.
It's one thing when that means Kennard and Baines. Another one that means like Kennard and Gigi or Kennard and Aldama.
I mean, just we got Santi and Jaren bringing the ball up the court if we need. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not always going to work. I just like, instead of what feels like the years-long tendency of Taylor when things get bad to go to a real small lineup, I liked this twist. Things are going bad. Let's go to a really big lineup. Also finding a way to get Gigi on the court, I'm cool with, even though Gigi did not have an ideal game. Finding ways to get Santi Aldama on the court, I'm cool with. And I thought it was interesting, again, that Scottie Pippen Jr. was not involved. Now, then finally, they did in the second quarter, or the very end of the first quarter, put in Scottie Pippen Jr. as the 11th guy. Maybe this game where you're turning the ball over constantly, you needed the smaller ball handler. But I don't know. I felt like I was yearning in this basketball game for more Luke and Desmond backcourts, or I don't know, maybe Gigi is too much. Make a good point. But I didn't really like the smaller lineup. So I don't know. I was just encouraged by that. Maybe I'm just grasping at things. Although, no, I said it when it happened that I was excited. It was still a close game at that point. I was excited to see Gigi get some run and Santi not as the quote unquote bigs.
Well, it was in part reflective, and to some degree, this is unavoidable because guys have been out all season. So Gigi just came back. You're still waiting. Who knows if Marcus Smart and Vince Williams will ever play basketball? But if and when they do, it's going to be the same kind of thing. Lineups out there who aren't used to playing with each other.
Yeah,
it was sort of reflective of a game where it was one team that knows exactly who they are, exactly who they're playing, exactly how they're playing, and they you can start the playoffs today for the Knicks. They're ready to go. And another team that's still as good as their record is, that still figured out who they are,
Yeah. So actually let's talk about Vince and Marcus. You were in Memphis for several days, right?
I'm in Memphis right now.
Oh, you're in Memphis right now. So
I'm in my dad's office for people who actually watch these things on video.
That's where everyone watches it. What have you heard? What are boots on the ground in Memphis? What can you find out? Where are Marcus Smart and Vince Williams Jr.?
So I had asked a few weeks ago when I was in Minnesota, and so were the Grizzlies.
Yeah.
I had asked Taylor Jenkins before the game, do you expect to get Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams Jr. back this month, right? This is early January, this question was asked.
Uh-huh.
And the answer was yes, and Gigi Jackson's back. And guess what? They only got one game left in the month of January, and we have not got the upgrade to doubtful from Vince Williams. We have not gotten the assigned to practice with the hustle, any of that. my understanding is that the Vince Williams thing is going a little bit slower than they were hoping. I still think I think we're on doubtful watch. I think any day now there should be some kind of upgrade or movement on him. But at this point, like I don't think he's going to be playing in January because they got one game left and nothing's happened. I do think I'm not trying to report, but I assume he's going to be back in the next couple of weeks at least. The Marcus Smart thing, like, I don't know, man. I mean, I'm at the point where I ask people, so is this dude ever going to play? And what you hear is like, yeah, he's going to play. And like, you know, if the injury is the injury and he's getting through it and whatever. But I don't know. I don't know on the Marcus Smart thing.
I feel like it's a legitimate and fair question. Will Marcus Smart ever play another game on the Grizzlies? Because we are,
yes, the trade deadline is
because
like,
we're 9 days from the trade deadline.
No, 100. I don't think he's going to play before then. There's no indication of that. And so if he gets traded, and there are different kinds of ways he could get traded, which we could get into or not. And so, yeah, I don't know. But I think this team, Jaylen Wells has been an absolute godsend. Like he didn't have a good game against the Knicks, but he just keeps doing this pretty much every day. And like I'm amazed at what he's done. But it's been a real savior because this team was built with the idea of Marcus Smart and Vince Williams. One of those two guys at least being very prominent in your lineups and your rotations and playing that role. And I think in terms of playoff basketball, this roster, unless they do something to change it, desperately needs at least one of those two guys to be prominent in a playoff rotation.
Yeah. So we are 9 days from the trade deadline. We're about then a week after that. So I guess like 16 days from the All-Star break. It feels like to me, I guess Vince is coming back after the All-Star break, hopefully, you know,
I think I'm officially on doubtful watch. Like I'm waiting, like every day when they put something up, maybe this is it. Like not that he's going to play, but there's going to be some sign of movement. Yeah. I do think we should get, and Taylor keeps getting asked about it, but they set that 3 to 6 week range on him. And I think this week is week 6 of that. Okay. So there needs to be some kind of official, not just Taylor talking before the game, but some kind of official team update on Vince this week.
So last thing, with the trade deadline approaching, with our talk of will Marcus Smart actually play another game on the Grizzlies, what do you, I would go with just even, what do you hope happens? Like, is there a trade target that you think, all right, if we could trade Marcus for this guy, or Marcus and Luke, or Marcus and John Conchar for this guy, that would really clear things up for us. Do you have a target?
I really don't. We could talk about some other kind of trades that could happen, but like I wrote a trade piece a month ago, and like I scoured all over the league. I wrote about the Jimmy Butler thing, then I've written about it since. To me, the Jimmy Butler thing could make sense under certain circumstances. I've never believed those circumstances will ever manifest. Beyond that, I identified 4 guys. One of them was Dorian Finney-Smith, and they made the exact trade offer I suggested, and they got turned down. One was Herb Jones, who was probably never available, but now has this injury, so he's off the table. There were a couple guys with the Clippers, one I wrote about, one I didn't, that I was interested in, but now the Clippers just won't keep being good, so those guys are not getting traded. Derek Jones Jr., Norman Powell. And the other was your guy, Cameron Johnson, and I'm somewhat torn on that. I think there are a lot of issues with that too. There are different issues than Jimmy Butler issues. Yeah, there are enough issues with that. I just don't think that will happen, and I'm sort of on the fence about it myself. And after that, I got a hard time seeing like the Grizzlies need to go get this guy that's going to make a difference. I have a hard time seeing what it is.
That's kind of where I'm at. My obsession with Cameron Johnson, I feel encouraged on the one sense where it seems like the acquisition cost of everyone is plummeting in some sense because the Thunder and Jazz and Nets have all the picks. So like, there's just fewer things out there to be moved. So like,
hey, since you're a Cameron Johnson advocate, let me question you on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Cameron Johnson, what's the deal you're offering the Nets you think they'll take? To me, there are 3 issues here. I'm going to work through them with you quickly. What's the deal you're offering? You think
the problem has always been the reason I didn't want to get rid of Zaire Williams's contract is the biggest matching salary is Marcus Smart, and they don't have any need whatsoever for Marcus Smart. You have to find a taker for Marcus Smart, like a third team that,
or that impacts the value you have to add to it, right?
Also, like my dream would be the Pistons who are having a good season are like, you know what? Marcus Smart would be great for our team. Unfortunately, there's no proof of concept that Marcus Smart plays basketball. So like Marcus Smart is frankly a negative asset. So like, I don't know. This is the problem. Like if the problem also like the Nets have too many picks.
This is the first to me of three problems. I'm just trying to get through the first one to you so I can get to the second and the third.
Yeah. So I would offer them a future. You'd have to offer them a future first. They don't want a 2025 first because they have so many 2025 firsts. So like I would say 2026 lottery protected first. Then I think you have to think about someone like Asante Aldama to sweeten it for them. And like then it's matching salary of you have to include contract. It's too messy if you don't want to Marcus Smart. Yeah.
So you're matching salary, and then you're giving them Santi in a 2026 first.
Yeah.
So I don't know whether Grizzlies are doing that. I don't think they like the idea of giving a first beyond 2025 because it ties up their flexibility and what have you.
Right.
I think that's worth doing depending on what you're getting back. But now they bring up my second point. So in this trade, you're trading Aldama away to bring in Cam Johnson, which solves the second question. Because if you're bringing in Cam Johnson but not trading away Santi Aldama, what are you doing with Santi Aldama as a restricted free agent? Yeah. What is your value proposition of Cameron Johnson versus Santi Aldama this season, next season, and the year after, which is the length of Cameron Johnson's contract? Who do you value more? You value Cam Johnson, I guess.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would, but also like my dream trade is not Santi Aldama. I have to include Santi Aldama for it to seem remotely reasonable.
Let's say you give them Gigi Jackson and a good pick, and they take it. Now you have Cam Johnson and Santi Aldama.
Yeah.
Are you re-signing Santi Aldama next summer when you have Cam Johnson under contract for $20 million for 3 more years?
Here's the thing. Robert Parra's stock has basically tripled in the past year. He's one of the richest people on earth. Yeah, I'm keeping everyone because I'm allowed to under the CBA.
Yeah. All right.
So, but like my dream was always Luke Kennard and Marcus Smart. That's your contract for Cam Johnson. Then you figure out, can we play Santi at the 3? Can we play Cam Johnson at the 3? For me, Cam Johnson is the dependable Jaylen Wells. He's a proven 17 point per game, 45% 3-point guy.
Let's get to the third issue then. The second issue, like maybe you solve it in a way the team doesn't. But to me, I think this question of Cam Johnson versus Santi Aldama could be part of the value proposition of making that trade, right?
Yeah.
The third question, let's say all your dreams have come true. You've acquired Cam Johnson without giving up Santi Aldama, whatever. You've acquired Cam Johnson. What is this role on the team?
I would say starting 3, and I would still probably start. I don't worry too much about the defensive limitations of him guarding other 3s. Also, the way they kind of, I don't know. I feel like you can cross match it enough, but
what about the limitations of him guarding 1s and 2s? Because when you look at this team and the way it's been constructed since they've had the John Morant, Desmond Bain backcourt, they like to use their 3 as someone who can guard across perimeter positions and basically take the toughest matchup. That's what Dylan Brooks did. That's what they traded for Marcus Smart to do. That is what Vince Williams did. That is what Jaylen Wells does. If you trade him for Cam Johnson and you're saying, hey, this is our small forward, that changes your approach defensively entirely.
Yeah,
and maybe it works out all the way around because he's so good offensively, but it requires a major change in how you do things defensively.
And it's not the perfect ideal fit. However, in my mind, it's a big improvement, which is why I would trade a lottery protected first in the future. Also, he's not my number 1 target anymore. Because I don't think it's possible. My dream for a while has been Andrew Wiggins. If the Warriors,
that's a good one.
If the Warriors somehow make a desperate move, their season's going poor. They know Andrew Wiggins is really, really good. I think Andrew Wiggins is amazing. Would be great. But here's my newest one, because I'm with you. I can't find any matches that make sense. I mean, I love the fact that the cost has plummeted on Jeremy Grant and Brandon Ingram, but those guys don't make any sense. They don't make sense on your team, salary wise, fit wise going forward. I want Tubani Kamara for the Trailblazers. He's young. He's an awesome defender. And listen, Blazers, you stink. Although honestly, they're getting better. They're having a nice little rebound here in January. Like I would say, all right, what's your long-term plan for him? Would you take our 2025 first for this guy? Would you thought you trade it first? I don't know if they would. That would be my thing. But also, Chris, it's boring. I come back to, none of these make sense, really. I probably would just maybe do nothing and hope that John Morant plays great in the postseason.
I mean, this seems like a team where if you're making a trade, you're making a trade to meaningfully upgrade your team for these playoffs, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
If that trade's not there, I wonder about other kinds of trades that you make.
Yeah.
Just as a matter of conducting business. To me, there's two genres of those. There's the can you get a second round pick or two for Jake LaRavia if you're not going to re-sign him kind of trade, right? If you're going to play GG over him and then you get to the playoffs, maybe you're not playing either anyway. There's that. The other thing I wonder about, and I've not written about this or talked about this, so I'll do it here first, I guess. Are they at the point yet where they're to look, and I don't think they are, but I think I might be. Are they at the point yet where you're looking for Marcus Smart escape hatch trades?
Yeah.
Where you're just like, Marcus Smart in the 2025 first, what can we get either that would be someone who could actually play basketball for us right now and or can clear salary going into the summer? Or do you reach a point where you're just like, we want to stop doing this? We want to be out of the Marcus Smart business.
Tim Hardaway Jr.
All right.
I mean, that's an expiring contract.
No, that's the genre I'm talking about.
I was just thinking of the Pistons, but like the Pistons like Tim Hardaway Jr., it seems like.
Brown.
What'd you say? You cut out.
Bruce Brown.
Yeah, Bruce Brown. It's the same amount. So Bruce Brown's a guy I don't feel like
Malcolm
the
Brogdon,
fit.
Lonzo Ball.
Malcolm Brogdon is a keep cashing those checks guy. I'm not into Malcolm Brogdon.
Right.
I think the Bruce Brown one is interesting. Not
Marcus
ideal
Smart in the 2025 first for Bruce Brown.
I mean, that would be the Raptors.
I do not think the Grizzlies would do that, but I'm just throwing that.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, without clear-cut options to upgrade your team, and with the uncertainty around Vince Williams Jr., it's sad to me where I'm like, I guess do nothing. You know,
right.
seems like the most likely thing, and then just hope. Hey, hopefully we can get somebody good again with the 2025 draft pick.
Even if you're super pessimistic about Marcus Smart this season, here's the pushback on that. So why do the Raptors do that? Well, you're a rebuilding team. You add a draft pick, not a good pick, but you add a pick. The other thing is like Marcus Smart's got another year in his contract, but now he's an expiring contract. You can use as a trade chip next summer. Well, that could also be true for the Grizzlies, right? So if you can't get any, so how much value is there in making the contract go poof when it's going to be an expiring contract next year anyway? I think that's a question.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Oh, here's a weird one. I've mentioned it before. Marcus Smart and Luke Kennard, I think actually just with Conchar. Marcus Smart and John Conchar for Chris Middleton.
That's one of the ones I have on my list. My thing there is that I worry he's too much damaged goods for the contract he has left.
He had a great game yesterday. If we're going small sample size.
Taylor Jenkins was an assistant coach.
I have Bucks fans who are in my Patreon who are not they're not keen on swapping Chris Middleton for Marcus Smart, even if Doc Rivers would probably love to have a Marcus Smart on the team.
Colin Sexton's one I thought of. He's under contract next year.
I would do a Colin Sexton. I would do Marcus Smart for Colin Sexton. Absolutely.
Well, Smart in the 2025.
Then we just become a very small, strange team.
Yeah.
Duncan Robinson? How long does that contract go? D'Angelo Russell might be expiring. Anyways.
Right. But this is a genre of trade that no one's really talking about until us right now, basically. Yeah. I don't think the Grizzlies have reached the point where they're just looking for that, what I call the escape hatch trades for Marcus Smart, but I don't know. That's a genre I would at least contemplate.
Yeah.
I don't know whatever they know. I don't know what they know about whether it's the thing about Smart is that I wouldn't say he's been good when he's played for the Grizzlies, but he hasn't been Chandler Parsons, Justice Winslow when he has played, right?
Oh, no. Yeah.
There is more reason to think that he can be a meaningful part of your playoff rotation if he can just get healthy.
I only make the Chandler Parsons, Justice Winslow comparisons due to game availability. Yeah, Marcus has he's been good. You know, he hasn't been outstanding, but he's been a good player when he's played. And I guess when he comes back after the trade deadline, that's our trade acquisition, Chris. Look, we got Marcus Smart and Vince Williams Jr.
Yeah,
something we already had.
I will not let go of the Vince Williams thing. I still think there's a chance you look up and he's your starting small forward when you open the playoffs.
Yeah. Well, anyways, Chris, we went a little bit long. I appreciate you doing that with me. Listeners, if you want more Grizzly stuff, go check out Chris's work over at the Daily Memphian. Give the Daily Memphian's Grizzlies podcast a listen. If you want more from me, you can get that at patreon.com/fastbreakbreakfast. All right, talk to you guys soon. Go Grizz.